pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. A couple of housekeeping notes before we start. Because this is filmed for broadcast on Public Access Channel 180 and Great River Arts YouTube channel, please speak into the mic at the podium. Please state your full name, your city, and county before you ask your question. Once your time is up, I will let you know with this little paper here. The forum is scheduled to end at 11 a.m. Contact information of all legislators is available at the registration at the podium right out by the door. Welcome to the Legislative Update hosted by the Little Falls Area Chamber and Tourism. My name is Purva Watton and I'm the President and CEO at the Chamber. With me I have Ms. Deb Holthouse, who is with us from our Government Affairs Committee. Thank you to Representative Mr. Shultz from District 10B and Mr. Mike Wiener from 5B for being with us today. Mr. Kresha and Mr. Wiesenberg had some prior commitments, that is why they cannot be here with us today. We will start today with hearing from our candidates. After that, we will open the floor for questions and comments from the audience. To ensure timeliness and fairness of the event, we ask the speakers to organize their thoughts and to not exceed over 2 minutes at the podium. This will allow for everyone who wishes to communicate their questions or concerns the time to do so. Please limit your remarks to issues that pertain to the state government. Once your time is up, again, I will remind you and let you know, so you're expected to kindly finish your questions and remarks. After everyone gets a chance to come to the podium, and if time permits, you can come back to ask more questions. We would like to remind the public that the views expressed during this session are those of the individual making the comments and not those of the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. This event is a part of the Chamber's efforts to give public a platform to communicate with your representatives. We will now begin with opening statements.
Checking to make sure that this, you can all hear me. Can you all hear me? Perfect. Good. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Isaac Shultz, State Representative for House District 10B, which is the southern half of Morrison County, the rural portions of Benton County, central part of Mille Lacs County, and then small portions of Kanabec and Isanti. Getting into this legislative update here, I'm excited to hear from you all. You obviously are paying attention to what's going on in our state, and so for starters, we're in the heart of the legislative session, and the real talks over the state budget have really just begun, and the real making of the sausage is about to happen, literally this weekend. So there is heavy negotiations happening in the House of Representatives between the Democrat and the Republican committee chairs in the House, and they're putting their bills together this weekend. And then those will be debated next week. So for frame of reference, we're about halfway through the legislative session. And so with that, I'll just say, and I'll just briefly talk about the budget, and then just really eager to engage about the issues that you all care about this session. But in an odd-numbered year, this is the year to set the state budget, and that is the primary order of business for the legislature. And for frame of reference for you, many of you are probably aware of a lot of how this all stacks up, but Minnesota 2 years ago had a nearly $20 billion budget surplus, and at the time, Democrats had the complete control of state government, and they set a state budget that was roughly just short of $72 billion, which was a 40% increase in spending, and there were $10 billion worth of taxes raised. And as a part of that, they set ongoing spending into the future at approximately $67-ish billion. And so that's basically the baseline moving forward, because that is the ongoing commitment that the Democrats put into law the last 2 years. And so as we approach this session, there is actually a budget deficit that's on the horizon 2 years from now. And so with that, we need to be very cognizant about ongoing spending that is really the crux of the conversation for us today. In the very short term, so this biennium, the budget presents a very, very small budget surplus that could be very quickly eaten up by any minute change in the economic forecast. So it's been my desire, and I believe of those of the Republican caucus, to frankly reallocate this gross mismanagement of tax dollars from the last 2 years, and to recenter ourselves on that which makes Minnesota more affordable. And that means cutting wasteful spending and pet projects, and focusing on the core services of government, and then returning money back to taxpayers. We know that life is very unaffordable right now. And our counties, our school districts, and every employer and every family is having a hard time today. You can't keep up with the cost of energy increases, property tax increases, and the like. And our priority should be on affordability. And so as we continue to go about this conversation, I'm sure Representative Wiener has a lot more to add to this. But as we center ourselves today, our focus is to really bring that state budget back in line with shared Minnesota values. And so Representative Wiener and myself are focused upon cutting a lot of the waste and the fraud that we've seen in state government. So I would say affordability and fraud are the top two things that I'm seeking to continue to address for the remainder of this legislative session. Thank you for being here.
Well, Isaac said I had a lot more to add, but I think he covered pretty much everything. A lot of good information there. So my name's Mike Wiener. I represent District 5B, which is all of Todd County, lower part of Wadena, 2 townships in Cass, and proud to have 2 townships in Morrison. And that's why I'm here today. A lot of the information that he gave you is spot on. What we've seen in the state of Minnesota is an unsustainable growth. And I'll give Isaac a lot of credit. He's very good at the specifics, and I like to take a look at the 10,000 foot level. What we've done in the state of Minnesota with the surplus, which was really one-time money. That was a surplus that was carried forward to a certain extent, but also a lot of COVID money that came into the state. We saw an increase in tax revenue and tax revenue through income and corporate because of COVID spending. But we also knew going into the last session that was going to be depleted rather quickly if it was spent. And it was not going to be replenished without raising taxes. So what we saw is exactly what we said. An increase in the budget of almost 40%, which, to put it into people's lives, has your income gone up 40% in the last 2 years? Can anybody say that out here? No. Let's take another step back. The state budget 10 years ago was $35 billion. We are now, well, right hovering around 70 billion. So that state budget has increased or has doubled in the last 10 years. And I'll ask the question again, has anyone's income in this room doubled in the last 10 years? Obvious answer is no. So when we see this growth of government, it's unsustainable. And what's happening is, I serve on the tax committee and energy this year, which I like both of those committees, but in the tax committee, we often have to compare ourselves to our neighbors. On a county level, we're going to compare it to the county next to us or the one very similar and say, what is their tax base? How are they spending? And there's differences, of course. But in the state of Minnesota, we look at the states around us. And every state around us is looking at our tax structure, looking at our spending and saying, keep doing what you're doing because you're driving people out and into our state. North and South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin have all dropped some of their income taxes. Our income tax is, and this is an interesting statistic, we didn't even have income tax in the state of Minnesota until like 1933. And now we are within the top 5 of highest income taxed states. Like I said, this is unsustainable. I come from a business background, and when it gets management heavy, when it gets top heavy, it ends up crashing because it is unsustainable. And when I see this in government, I see the same similarities. I want, as a representative for the people in my area and the people in my state, to have a future here. But the policies that have been promoted are really driving people out. We've lost over 20,000 people just in the last year. We've lost, I believe it was and I apologize, I think it's $2.3 billion worth of income, revenue, taxability stuff in the state. When companies take their headquarters and go to other countries, other states, when businesses leave, Sportsman's Guide is now talking about going to Indiana. We are taxing our businesses, our people out of this state. And that is unsustainable. And if we want a future for our kids, our grandkids, we have to change course. And that's what I hope to do, bring some of that rural common sense to those committees. But it is challenging. So with that, the other thing that I would like to do, and I think Isaac brought it up, is we want to hear from the people, their questions, because this is very important. When we have visitors down at the Capitol, I'll make as much time as we can. I love hearing from the people that we represent, their concerns, their voice, and hopefully we can give you some educated, sound answers. And I've got a good rep right beside me here, so we'll do our best today. With that, we can go to.
Mr. Wiener, Representative Wiener, could you please raise your voice or raise the microphone?
I will do better, sir.
Thank you, sir. I left my hearing aids at home.
Okay.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for questions from the audience. Make sure to please state your name and the city and the county you're with, and please speak into the mic at the podium. Thank you.
Sit anywhere?
Do you want the podium or did you want him?
Here, yes.
Podium.
Hey, I just got back from. Hey, good morning. Thanks for being here today. Kathy Lang, Morrison County Habitat. And I'm just here today, thank you both for taking the time out. The statewide Housing Tax Credit Contribution Fund. Okay, our Habitat has received $75,000 by taxpayers in our local area, converting their dollars that they would have a liability in taxes to contributing to Habitat for Affordable Housing. I don't know the term affordable housing, if that's even a thing right now, because none of it is affordable. And to try and, service our target population that Habitat does, which is 30 to 75% AMI, it's challenging to structure mortgages for that. But this tax fund has been, actually, it was capped at $9 million for 3 years. So the first year we received $21,000. The second year we received $54,000. And this year, when it opened again in February, the cap at $9 million is already gone. And so within that 1 month time, $9 million was across statewide, was already designated to impact affordable housing. We need more than that because basically in a month and a half, that those dollars are gone. And so when I heard that it was that it was at 8 million, I was calling our regular contributors to this. Good morning, Representative Kresha. I'm talking about the tax contribution fund. And so what I'm kind of begging for is to increase that, because the contributors that gave the previous 2 years, I called, and they didn't get in time. They have money they want to contribute to local affordable housing, but it's already capped out in this short amount of time. So I don't know how up to speed you are on that fund, but I would appreciate anything that we could move forward with that.
Just really quickly, Kathy, could you restate the name of the fund?
Statewide Housing Tax Contribution Fund. And it went through Minnesota Housing, and then what happens is once we complete a home, we receive the funds that have been contributed for that. And so what happens is taxpayers they get a tax credit of up to 85% of the amount that they contributed.
Well, thank you. I'm going to do a little bit of additional research into that and find out exactly what that funding amount was, the previous biennium, what we have in ongoing funding before taking a look at exactly what the budget target is specifically for all of housing. As you know, we're dealing with a lot of constraints in the budget. So I can't promise anything, but as you know, there was over $1 billion in the housing budget from 2 years ago, and a lot of that was more metro-centric, and a goal that the legislators here across the desk and frankly all of the House Republican caucus is to better represent the priorities of rural Minnesota. I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as it relates to county school district issues and the like, but the same is true for housing, and so that's what I'd add at this point.
So yes, we know that housing is an issue, but specifically low-income housing. And University of Kentucky did a good study on this. I have the link somewhere, but if you look it up, they talked about what the issues are as far as housing, and it's really that low-income housing. What we're seeing across the state, and there was a study as well that was done, our expenses are what it costs to build a house in Minnesota versus the states beside us. And I think it was right across the river into Wisconsin, and we can add between $20,000 and $30,000 per house in the state of Minnesota by regulations, taxation, and so forth. So some of those issues we really need to address, because if we're driving the cost of housing up so that young people can't get into homes, we also have the aging population that wants to move off of the family farm, so to speak, or off of the country home and move into a patio-like setup or something on the edge of town. Well, construction costs are quite a bit higher than they used to be. The other thing that we saw, especially during the 2008 housing bubble, was that we lost almost 40% of the construction companies in our state. So there's a shortage simply of people to do those jobs. I mean, combine that with several factors in the state, and we're looking at some issues. The other thing, again, is with that aging population, how the matrix of housing is really switched. You know, a starter home 20 years ago used to be 1,300 square feet, and now it's over 2,200. The cost of them has gone from right around $100,000, and I think the average now is well over $3,000. So it's really pricing people out of that market, which means what kind of housing do we need to set up? It's the low-income housing. Another issue that Isaac had just mentioned was the last legislative session. There was quite a bit more money that went to the metro than outstate Minnesota. And I did have a conversation, and this is still very early in the process, but I had a conversation with the lead in housing yesterday, as a matter of fact. And that bill, although it's quite a bit smaller than last session, has about a 60-40 split as far as metro versus urban. So that means we have the potential at this time. Granted, there's no guarantees until the final gavel falls, but right now in those negotiations, it is looking better for rural Minnesota to get some help as far as housing.
Thank you. All right.
Before we begin, Mr. Kresha is here, and I understand you have some time constraints because there's some other commitments that you have to get to. But if you can please introduce yourself and anything that you'd like to communicate to the audience, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Judith. Sorry to jump in front of you.
That's okay.
So I see Greg Johnson, Doug, and Mark. So I'm on my way to the high school, actually. I have to teach some students. But I wanted to stop in. The reason I had a little break is, as the chair of the Education Finance, our negotiations have stopped. So, and I'll explain that in a second. It just happens. You got to pause. So I had my morning freed up by about 20 minutes. So I thought I could stop in here for a couple minutes before I go to the high school. Mike and Isaac, they're going to do a great job. They understand the issues as well. But I can give you a little insight on the education, because I'm the chair of the Education Finance. So let me just throw out what's going on right now. I know a lot of people say to me, well, what's the federal doing? What's the federal? The federal's not affecting us right now. There's whatever proposed they are, those cuts, if there are some, won't be realized until we actually have clarity on what dollars could change. Just getting rid of the Department of Education at the federal level, all they do is move dollars. They don't actually send it to us. So block grants, special ed, they'll be handled. The SBA would, so I don't know what they're going to do at the federal level. That's not our problem. But what I have asked is, what are the actual cuts? And the Minnesota Department of Education said, we have 0 cuts right now from the federal. So what happened? In November, we got our first forecast, and that budget showed a $6 billion deficit in what we call the tails, the outlying years. The governor then released his first budget, which was $174 million in cuts to education. And we in the House, Republicans, our committee said, no, that's not acceptable. And then what happened was the Senate released their budget, which was a $600 million cut to education, and we said, no, that's not acceptable. The House Republican budget, and working with the House DFL, we have 0 cuts. We have 0 cuts this year, and we have 0 cuts next year. So just a kudos to our colleagues in the House. We held fast and said, we're not cutting education. I don't handle the other areas. I fight for my areas. So what we proposed to, and we're in conversations with my DFL colleagues on education, what we proposed as a budget was, the number one thing I'm hearing from schools right now is, as much as things are challenging and we see all the cuts, the unemployment, paying people to not work over the summers does not work mechanically. Now, there's maybe other ways, and I certainly would hope schools, if they want to find ways to extend those employment or to retain their people, but that's what the schools are already trying to do. That's what I've heard. But that is a $135 million ask that we don't have money for. Coming next would be the paid family leave, which is an added burden on top of the schools who've already negotiated that in their contracts. So those 2 mandates for schools alone are super expensive. It's just what we're looking at in the reality of this. And then you throw special ed costs on top of that, the rising needs and what we do for IEPs, those are driving the education budget up, just so we're clear on that. So what we proposed, my proposal last night that was rejected was, let's remove the UI. That's $135 million. That was, again, that's a benefit because people still have access to unemployment. If you lose your job because of unforeseen circumstances, the schools could accept that, put you on UI, and then they pay that to the state. That was always there. This is an added benefit that, frankly, is going to roll down to taxpayers. Actually, in your levies, if we don't control it. But I proposed take that $135 million off the top, put $75 million of that in LOR, which is the most fair way to go. So every district would have gotten about $40 a student. Every district, doesn't matter what your zip code is. And then $25 million would go to long-term facilities, allow us to do our roofs, our maintenance, things that we know are in dire need. And then the other, $34 million would have been compensatory to hold us harmless. I thought that was a pretty fair deal. And what I was told was that's a non-starter. So that's why I'm here today. So what I'm finding out, and just so you know for the education, I'm sorry, I'm talking specifically education, because I really do care about this issue. My kids, my goodness, I've been through Judith's early childhood classes, and I'm sorry about Bill, but Bill read to my kids in the library, and I remember all these things. Elizabeth babysat my kids. So this goes way back, that you scratch your skin, we go really deep with education. That's why we held fast on the cuts. But where we are now is if we don't hold the line on the cuts, we're laying off more teachers, folks. It's going to get deeper and deeper, because what I realized in negotiations with the governor and the staff is we passed this inflation, and it's going to be 2.7% and 3%, which sounds great. Schools are going to get more money. But what I realized in negotiation was, well, that money was never really intended for general revenue. It's intended to pay for paid family leave, UI, and everything else. And once you run those costs up and you run all the benefits and the other side of it, our schools are in the hole. I can do math, I can run spreadsheets, I can run forecasts, and I can tell you $6 billion will be a light ask if we don't correct that. The other side of this, if we don't pass the budget, it will go on to levies. And unfortunately, Superintendent Johnson and the school boards will be asking taxpayers to pay for that because the state doesn't have any money. So that's why I have extra 10 minutes today. Negotiations broke down. So I have a couple minutes, but I didn't want to take everything. So I did want to give the education side. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Judith Hecht, longtime resident of Little Falls, a retired teacher, community volunteer in lots of areas. And I'd like to express my disappointment at having political beliefs trivialized by Minnesota State Bill SF 2589-0. This bill was authored by Nathan Wiesenberg and 4 other elected officials who, as far as I know, have no mental health training. This feels like something that a group of drinking buddies would come up with. But unlike this group, they did not wake up in the morning and throw it in the trash. My concern with our president and government is a valid concern. Safeguards have been built into our Constitution to prevent abuse. My concern that a constitutional crisis is imminent is real. When you look at your oath of office that I printed off, it says, "I do solemnly swear to affirm that I support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of this office." Due process is not being followed. People have been rounded up and deported without due process. Allocated federal money has been blocked. Birthright citizenship is being challenged. These constitutional rights need to be upheld. They are happening in Minnesota. They can all be legally changed by following the rule of law, but they are being illegally challenged at this point. Maybe there's a mental illness diagnosis that can address this lack of action and concern regarding an oath of office, your oath of office, and upholding our Constitution. Thank you.
Judith, you should just stay up there for a second. We'll respond.
Okay.
Thank you, Judith. Number one, thank you for expressing your opinion, and you have First Amendment rights just like every single person in this room. So we appreciate hearing from you. You mentioned a Senate bill. That bill hasn't been introduced in the House.
I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the House there's about 3,000 bills already presented. The percentage of them that get passed is minor. And it was something that kind of floored me when I first went down there. These huge number of bills that get presented and go nowhere. Sometimes bills they're in reaction to things that we see in committee or a reaction to something else that has happened. And is it a justifying of bills like this? No, not at all. But it is a kind of political gamesmanship sometimes when we see bills on both sides that get presented because of the environment. Is it healthy? I tell you what, there's a lot of stress that goes on down there. And I'm not justifying any behavior, but I do see people who wouldn't necessarily act or behave in a way at home, act or behave in a way at the Capitol that doesn't reflect who they are. So with that being said, that bill does not have a House companion, as far as I know, and its chances of going anywhere is basically nil.
Jennifer, Judith, you're right. That's indefensible. What we do down there is very serious, and when bills like this get dropped, I don't care who does it. And I've told our side, these guys have seen the emails, if you come to my committee with a bad bill, I will table it and I'll send you home. We have a level of conduct and we have a level of ethics, and when things like this happen, doesn't matter where the side comes from, it minimizes our role and it puts us in a spot where you rightly as the public think we're idiots. And I think that's poor. I think that's poor behavior. And there is no House companion, at least not that I know of that anybody would sign on to that, because the issues are so dire right now. We need everybody understanding how bad this is. And when we minimize and act like children with a bill like that, we're not getting anywhere. The reason I'm here today is because rather than talking to each other in negotiations, we're talking at each other and we're talking past each other. And bills like this, thank you for bringing that up. Bills like that, and I don't care who they come from, if they come from somebody that I work with in the House, I would be the first to say that was dumb, pull it apart. You've made our job harder. So thank you for bringing that up. It's indefensible, and you're right.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. James Storley, Little Falls, Morrison County, Minnesota. I'm here as a veteran, 22-year retired from the Army and National Guard. And Representative Kresha, I'm sure you know one of the questions I'm going to have here.
Shocking.
I'd like to know where that resolution that you had so graciously got put together last year for our National Guard and Reserve component burial equalities. I'd like to know where that's at and if that's going to actually, hopefully, you all can get behind it and get it to the floor for a vote. The other thing, one other thing, I am the DAV commander here for Morrison County Chapter 12, which is the Disabled American Veterans. I'm also with the American Legion Post 46 on the executive board. We got a few other members here too. I'll invite you all to our fish fry tonight at the Legion. Just a little plug for the posts. Representative Shultz and Wiener, you both said you'd like to hear from your constituents. Well, I'll tell you what, guess what Wednesday is? Veterans Day on the Hill. You're going to have about 700 people in that rotunda that day making a lot of noise. So I hope you come around and come and talk to us. And there will be about 35 of us on a bus that the DAV is paying for to get us down to there. We do have room for probably 10 more. If anybody's interested, I could get you on that bus. So, all right, let me know if you're going to support our Veterans Omnibus Bill and where that burial equality bill is at.
Yeah, thanks, James. Let me just give a quick update. So the resolution's passed. That's done. That gave us the ability to move this forward and amplify the issue you've got. The other thing is, I'll just say on the veterans issue, thank goodness for you guys are coming down there. We have a lot of agreement on the veterans issues. In fact, in the House, we got an agreement to have a subcommittee. In the Senate, we didn't get that same commitment, so we're able to move the things in the House. So I won't speak for the Senate. But, we've had great conversations with our colleagues who are veterans. One of the gentlemen that I worked most closely with who retired was Command Sergeant Jerry Newton, who helped me get the military museum built, and he's been a great advocate. So on issues related to veterans, we come across the aisle and we talk very cohesively and collaboratively on that. And just to let you know, while my son served and my father served and I did not, I live with Jeff Howe, who's a retired lieutenant colonel, who basically tells me when I have to vote on veterans issues.
Well, and I appreciate you taking that up and
If
getting
everybody
that
worked
done.
as hard as you did, we'd have a lot more things get passed, so thank you.
Just quickly to get to your point, I believe you're talking about House File 840, which is the one for the spouses. Is that right? I mean, Ron, you and I talked about that. Is that the one?
There's actually a couple of them, but it will, what it's all in is the Veterans Omnibus Bill. There's a couple of files in there that would be part of that omnibus bill. So, yeah, I'm hoping you can get behind. There's really two big issues that the DAV is after. I know the Allegiant and VFW has some other stuff that is going into there, but yeah, it's the property tax exclusion allowance for our veterans and our hunting and fishing licenses for our disabled American veterans.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. If that's the contents of that, I'll be supporting that bill. I'll just mention for the record, you know, we have all voted on this desk for that property tax exclusion increase last session. There's been a lot of attention to that paid this session, and I have, you know, they're negotiating the contents of the omnibus bill this weekend, but I honestly anticipate that that's going to move forward locally. John Ulrich came down and testified in support of that in March, and as it relates to your day on the Hill, I better see Mr. Jim Meyer there.
I believe he did. I believe he signed up to go on that bus. So you tell him that when he comes up here and speaks. So, thank you.
So we did hear that in the tax committee, which I'm on, which is good. When we have this in a subcommittee, I really think the veterans should have been entirely separate. But we'll see what happens. And I just looked at my schedule for some reason. Did you guys reach out to my office?
I'm sure we did.
Okay.
Because I know Trent Dilks, we got a thing through the DAV in Minnesota known as Minfluence. It's and the Commander's Action Network. The Minfluence is state level. Commander's Action Network is national level. And when things like this come through, we hit a submit button. And so if we have any veterans in your district signed up for that, you should have got something.
And I do not see it on my schedule. And when we have Day at the Hill, for whatever group it is, if it's the Farmers' Day on the Hill, those are the people we want to meet with. You know, those are the people that, not just a rally in the rotunda, but we want to sit down, we want to talk with the people in our area that show up. So I'll have to find out if it was dropped on our end or we never got if Jim isn't going to come down and talk to me for some reason, because.
Mike, let me get up today when I get home. I'll get a hold of Trent Dilks, our legislative director. You guys have probably had him or spoke to him at some time. And you're with District 5, right?
5B is my area,
5B.
yes.
Let me see if we have anybody coming to the Capitol on Wednesday that day where they could get a hold of you and set up an appointment, because Trent will set them up for around 10:30 in the morning. And I'll see if we have somebody from there that'll come and talk to you.
I've got tax committee in the
Or
morning, but I
if you
can.
want to talk with me, even though I'm in a different district, I'll gladly come into your office.
Well, you're in Morrison County, correct?
I'm in Little Falls, yeah.
And luckily, I have 2 townships in Morrison County, so I think that's close enough. But yeah, if we can set something up, that'd be great.
And Jim, just quickly, the Centennial Building's a little locked down. Sheriff, let your ears be plugged for this one. Just call me, I'll open the doors and I'll let you in, and I'll get you around to offices.
All right, thanks, Ron.
I found your guys' detail too, and I sent it to Ron and Mike, so they have it in their inboxes now.
I'm Carol Anderson. I work for Morrison County Community Development here in Little Falls, and I want to thank Representative Shultz for signing on to the Minnesota Youth Program Bill. You talk about common sense, and we want to get back down to the common sense. Now, I've met with farmers across the state, and from the Farm Bureau, wheat growers, soybean growers, Farmers Union, and they said to me, how do we get our kids interested in careers in rural Minnesota? And I said, well, you need to go to the Workforce Center. They've got a youth program there. With the limited funds they have, they can put career counselors, 1 day a week in schools, and that's all they work with is career counseling. And we've got some of the finest ones in the audience here today. And so, also, what's happening with that, explore different careers. We have problems in rural areas, as you know, with housing and daycare, and job training. So, the Little Falls School District has really stepped up here in Little Falls. They opened a daycare center. Now what they're doing is we're partnering with Habitat for Humanity and the school district and the youth program so that we can build houses on land that the school district has and can train the kids, not only on just the carpentry part of it, but the plumbing, the electrical, the sheetrock, the painting, all of that goes into that to, let these kids understand what it would be like to work in that trade. And so that's why this bill is so important, and I thank you for signing on to it. And I would hope that you all would support, funding for our youth programs so that we can put career counselors in all the schools in rural Minnesota, even in the metro as far as that goes, but rural really needs it. So kids can understand all the careers that are out there, from mechanics to CDL to agronomy to nursing, all of that's out there, and keep these kids in rural Minnesota. So thank you.
Okay, let's go real quick. So, thank you, Carol, and I have to run because Mr. Johnson only gives me 50 minutes with these kids, so maybe you could fix that. But to your point, I'm actually going to work with the aviation students because, yes, the great work the school's doing, whether it's all these career technical and the aviation, the commercial driver's license, and so that's fantastic. So, but I want these guys to respond, and thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Thank you, Carol, for your continued advocacy on a whole host of issues. I think that we have a lot of synergies on the things that we're working on this session that you and I have talked about, including this program, which is very broadly bipartisan from urban, suburban, and rural communities, and has that kind of authorship in both the House and the Senate. In addition, I will just say, that funding comes through the committee of jurisdiction that I have, the Workforce Development, Labor and Industry, and Economic Development, or Jobs Committee. And so that's certainly something that I expect will be a part of the final puzzle at the very end of the day.
So are you taking responsibility if that doesn't get in? Just kidding. Well, we know how the process works, and there's a lot of things that go into, the reference was making the sausage before, that's very accurate. There's a lot of trading, working back and forth when it all comes together. So, there's no guarantees when it comes to the end of session. But you said something, and I'd really like to emphasize this. Keeping kids in rural Minnesota. I grew up, south of town, south of Long Prairie. I grew up in the suburbs of Little Sauk. It's rural. I moved away, went to college, lived in St. Cloud, met my wife, started our family, and when my daughter was about 2 years old, and I apologized to St. Cloud, but I said, this is no place to raise a family. And we moved back home, which was Long Prairie. And my wife comes from California. So that was a big change for her. But this is a great place. Rural Minnesota is an amazing place to start a family. But we have to have opportunities here. We have to have job creation. We have to have a tax base that is affordable. And all of those things tie together. We have amazing people. We have faith-based, which I think is important in our population. And there obviously is an appeal in greater Minnesota. If there wasn't, you wouldn't see the people that are moving out of the metro to come up here. We've seen the transition and people who are coming to our small towns because they want our way of life. So we do definitely need to work together to make sure that our kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, the next 7 generations have the opportunities that I feel so blessed to have growing up here. Mom still lives on the family farm. We call it the home farm. Dad passed away a number of years ago, but going to grandma's is a half-mile walk down the road. That experience for my children is huge. When you mention the daycares, this is something we can actually do. And you can sit down. I don't, sorry to keep you standing there, but we overregulated our daycares out of the state of Minnesota. There was, I think we've lost nearly 50% in greater Minnesota since certain regulations took place. Because what happened was those grandparents, single mother or mothers that were, maybe the husband was working a job, they were raising their own family, we regulated them out of business. But what better way to have a daycare than to drop your kids off at a grandparent, even if it's not your own? I am soon, well, within the next year, going to be a grandparent myself. That kind of ages me a little bit. I had to stop and think about that a little bit, but my daughter is going to have a baby. And how do I want that grandchild to be raised, taken care of, if I wasn't there? If we weren't as close of a family as we are? Because my kids have only been in daycare in a setting like that when I lived in St. Cloud. But if it wasn't my grandma watching my future grandchild, or my mother, I'm sorry, watching my future grandchild, I would want another grandmother watching. Because I feel that the experience and the love that those grandparents have is crucial to the development of the family. But we have regulated those out of business. The other thing is tax structure. We have people that would like to do this, but if you're on Social Security or if you're on a fixed income, you can only make so much money. And they can't do something on the side, like watching a child, because then they would lose their Social Security benefits. So we have to look at all of these things that factor into these decisions and work together. The trades, absolutely. With the advancement of AI in our country, in our world, that is going to greatly impact how we look at life, education, everything. So we live in amazing times, and we've got to come up with some creative ideas to make life work. But our rural life here is amazing, and truly blessed to live where I do. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Doug Plouffe. I am a lifelong resident of Morrison County, and I live in Caldrum Township. I had the pleasure of being a teacher here at the high school in Little Falls for quite a number of years, and Nathan Wiesenberg was one of my students, and I always appreciated his common sense ways of looking at things as a classroom student and bringing up situations and explaining his ideas to the class. And recently, though, he brought up a bill, or he's introducing a bill, and I don't know, maybe it'll never reach the floor of the House and maybe it'll never be voted upon, but to me it seemed like he is taking away the opportunities of conservation officers in our state to address problems and protect our natural resources in our state. And I guess I'm disappointed he's not here today, because I'd love to hear his response to this, but he introduced a bill that would, if a conservation officer finds a person who's driving a snowmobile that's done a burglary, they cannot confiscate the snowmobile. And it seemed to me like, hey, there's only 180 conservation officers in our state. And they've got to cover 87 counties. It doesn't allow for a lot of people to be, eyes to be out there watching. And you take a county like Otter Tail, where we have a cabin, if someone is doing a burglary, there's over 1,000 lakes on there. If someone's doing a burglary of a fish house and the snowmobile is caught, they're not able to seize that snowmobile. It just seems like we're handcuffing the conservation officers. If there's a firearm, in his bill, if there's a firearm that's unlawfully possessed, they cannot confiscate that firearm. Again, that seems like, why have the conservation officers in the first place if we're not able to confiscate? My time's up? Really? I didn't even get to the most important part. So, I don't know, maybe this bill will never reach the floor. There's more to the bill that
Just
I
quickly,
find-
Doug, do you happen to know what the number of the bill
No, I
is?
do not.
Okay.
It was in the Outdoor News magazine in the last 10 days. And in addition, there was, shooting at unlawfully taking big game, you cannot seize the motor vehicle. It seems like our conservation officers have no bite to their, or no teeth in their bite. Yes.
I haven't. Thank you, Doug. I haven't yet found it. I'll be looking for it. And I, Mike and I can review it. I think, and I don't know. I don't, I don't know if it's been introduced in the House. I would have thought that if it was moving forward, that it would have been heard in the Environment and Natural Resources Committee in the House. It wasn't, and I sit on that committee as well. So, I'm sure there actually is some.
Okay.
I think there is some. I think there's probably some good in the idea that's proposed, and just kind of curtailing some of the roles and responsibilities of conservation officers, just from the way that you outlined it. But I think the devil's in the details too. So I would need to review those things.
Yeah, it's really tough to comment on a bill without even knowing the number of it. But like I said before, in reference to another piece of legislation, I think we're over 3,000 bills, in the House right now. We did see one this year that would be natural resources bill, went through the House, and I think that one passed through the Senate as well, where you can mark your property with purple paint. That was an interesting bill, and it started conversations that, some people at first said, this is silly, why are we doing this? I believe there's 22 other states that have something of the same law. And after consideration, I looked at that bill and thought, there's a lot of property lines where there isn't a fence. There isn't a clear demarcation, where if you simply just paint the trees in, if you know where the line is, it can stop, especially if you have property next to public land. So sometimes these bills will start off as conversation starters as well, but may not go anywhere. We see that quite a bit. There was one in tax committee the other day that got rather contentious, was the fifth tier taxes, and the author themselves said that this was basically just to put an idea out there. And not all ideas are good ideas. But this is part of what we do too. And, the opportunity to amend, to look at bills, to see how it's going to affect other people. Sometimes these are going to be dropped. Other times they may be adjusted and, massaged a little bit so that they are workable. But without knowing the bill number themselves, it's really hard to give you the specifics.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Watton and the Chamber for sponsoring this, and thank the representatives for being here. This is important, and I'm very pleased to see so many people here. We had one of these a year ago, and there were just a couple of us here, and I thought, well, that's kind of sad, but to see the good participation that we have this morning, very pleased to see that. First of all, just a comment, Mr. Wiener, you were talking about the income tax not being in place till 1933. I want to mention that sales taxes were not in place until the late 60s, I think. Oh, sorry. Brian Bergs, Morrison County, Bellevue Township. Thank you. Sales taxes didn't come into place until the late 60s. I think 67, Governor Levander signed into law a temporary 3% sales tax to fund the crisis in education. We still have it today, and it's over double that. My question, very quickly, Representative Shultz knows this is an issue for my wife and I is election integrity. Wondering what the chances are for, I think it's Bill 2177, House Bill on election integrity requiring voter ID and making absentee voting more secure, what the chances are for that to go through. We saw that Hennepin County broke the law. There were no penalties from that with their mail-in voting. Secretary Simon, Governor Waltz said, no, Hennepin County is not doing that, but the Supreme Court said, yes, they broke the law, there were no penalties. We need to tighten election integrity, and if you could answer, if you know where that bill is going, along with some other election integrity bills.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to highlight election integrity. I think it's the heart and the core of a strong constitutional republic. And I would say, unfortunately, to this point in Minnesota, Democrats have just had a nearly hands-off approach to elections policy. I'm eager to see what's in the elections omnibus bill as they negotiate it or put it together this weekend. I don't think that there's been significant movement to get Democrats to move in the direction of election integrity. I think what's more exciting is actually what we saw on Tuesday night. Maybe none of you heard or saw this, but in Wisconsin, while they didn't have great results for the conservatives for the Supreme Court, they did win the constitutional amendment for voter ID in Wisconsin. I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was about a 2-1 win. So I think that that's going to be something that we continue to prioritize on our side. As you know, the political realities of for Mike and I and for conservatives, Republicans is, in order to get that as an example on the ballot in the future, we're going to have to win the House with a full Republican majority and win the Senate with a Senate Republican majority. We can do that in 2026 and get it on the ballot as soon as the election in 2028, so that's the path for us moving forward, and we'll continue to highlight those things. And I think that's all that I have to add on that.
In Europe, the majority of their countries have voter ID. And it's a hallmark of elections, free and fair elections across the world. In some African countries, you have to use the ink and give a thumbprint for elections. But for some reason in our country, we have people who feel that there isn't fraud in the elections, and I challenge that idea because when there is literally billions of dollars at stake, to think that the potential isn't there for fraud is kind of a crazy idea to me. I'm not sure where the bills are in the Elections Committee. I don't serve on that one. I know it is definitely a concern on our side, especially in this state, when we saw during COVID how the rules changed. And look at the statistic anomalies that took place then. I like numbers. And when we saw how in certain areas the votes increased that shouldn't have happened. We had less turnout, we had less people just carrying on with their daily lives, but for some reason, we ended up with more votes, which is, like I said, I like numbers, but this is a statistic anomaly that shouldn't have happened. The dynamics in government right now in the state of Minnesota, a check and balance is crucial, but it also means that government moves slow. When we have, in the House, we have a tie, 67-67, so that only bills that have bipartisan, heavy support on both sides are going to move forward, which means in some cases what people have said, these are very, very watered down, very moderate bills. In the Senate, of course, the balance is on the Democrat side, and then you've got the governorship. So even if we passed a bill in the House, it would still have to get past the Senate and the governor, which would be difficult, since the governor really pushed some of those election changes during COVID through the Secretary of State. So what that means is, yes, we'd have to work through the process, but we also need to highlight those anomalies. We need to talk about them, because all too often people turn a blind eye or say that can't happen. But when we see more and more evidence that those statistical anomalies are popping up, that should open up people's eyes to say, yeah, we need voter ID. This is a good thing. You have to have an ID to buy cigarettes, to do so many things in our life, and yet one of the most important things, voting, you don't have to have an ID. We should really look at that and say this makes more sense to have such a crucial part of our political lives where you have to have an ID. It'll take some time to get there, but it takes more people pushing and saying it needs to be done.
Thank you.
Mary Kruger, Morrison County, Bellevue Township. I'm very disappointed that Nathan Wiesenberg isn't here. And I either didn't hear or I missed the reason he wasn't here.
He had a prior commitment. He had a commitment to be at.
So this commitment was the lesser.
So we try our best to invite everyone, and we try to host this when most of them are available. This was the day that worked out best for most of the people to be here.
I too am really appalled at the bill, the Senate bill SF 2589. And I realize Representative Kresha said that there is no House companion. I'd like to hear from the other House members some kind of affirmation that this isn't going to go anywhere. You made no comments. You two made no comments on it.
Well, Mary, I'll take that. I'll take that fully. You're referencing the bill that is the Trump derangement syndrome is added to the definition of mental illness, Senate File 2589. We just had actually it's today. Today is the deadline for bills to be heard in both the House and the Senate. That bill, number one, is not introduced in the House, and number two, it did not meet committee deadlines in either the House or the Senate. The bill is not moving forward this session.
Do either one of you, realizing you're not Nathan Wiesenberg, we got an empty chair, do either one of you, I have several questions about the bill, the motivation for the bill. I don't understand what the desired outcome, what the problem, what his intention was for that. Can you address that? I mean, I'm one of the people that would be defined as mentally ill for being outraged at Trump policies. And I kind of wanted to know what was the intention, what was the desired end result? Can either of you address that?
Well, I think that would be best addressed to that individual. like I said before, there's a lot of bills that are put forward, and there's, 4 authors, I think, on that bill. It'd be best to ask the senator. Now, especially on the end of session, like Representative Kresha had pointed out, schedules can change very quickly. To have him here this morning was a good thing. He had the opportunity to address everyone, but I know committee meetings can get added, and I think that was the case today with Senator Wiesenberg. I actually had a chance to talk to him last night. And I don't know if you guys know the story, but there was a religious display that we put up down at the Capitol. I worked with another group. They got the permit to do that. We put a cross and the 10 Commandments out on the Capitol lawn. And that was in response to a satanic display that was put up in December. We said, if one group can display their religious beliefs, then everyone should have the opportunity. So anyways, I was taking that down because it was vandalized. It was actually destroyed the other day, and I had a chance to talk to the senator last night. And I know he said he wasn't coming home today because he had committee, they're finalizing committees in the Senate. So that's all I know. But those questions as to that bill would be best addressed to the senator.
If we ever have access to them. It's my,
You can go on the state Minnesota website, and every office, I believe on the Senate, has a contact, the phone number as well. Contact his office.
We have his contact info out on the table as well.
Good morning. My name is James Harmeyer. I'm Buckman Township, Morrison County. Thank you to the chair and to the House. I didn't intend to speak here, but in my age, I've come to determine, having been more places than y'all have been, how to say there to you, to the House, I would say there's no education in getting kicked a second time by a mule. You've already felt the Democrats. You felt how they acted. To give them any sympathy, getting kicked again is no sympathy to you. You deserve what you're getting out on the trail from both sides. However, that being said about the mental illness, which we all could be accused of at one point or another, I would simply say that I am a Trump supporter. I am a Nathan Wiesenberg supporter, and I've supported him as a member of the GOP in Morrison County. And I have reasonings for that. The reasoning I say is you never, ever should be deranged over a person you have never met. There have been a lot of innuendos and characters and assassinations done to people on both sides, which should never happen because you've never met that person. So let's just ratchet it down to where we speak of people we actually know. Back in the 70s, when I was here, I went to a meeting on the Mississippi River, making it. One of the things that struck me as funny, that was before Crane Lakes Meadow came out. That was a meeting that said, we are going a 50-year, 75, and 100-year program. And in that program, it was stated that there is going to be separation by integration. Okay. Anyway, here we are. We're separating our population out. We had a big dispute over Crane Lake. We lost our property. We lost our income from the farmers. We lost that. You gave up your rights because you expected somebody else to fight for you. Nobody should fight for you. Nobody should have to make programs for your children. If you can't make your children get up and do laundry and that, anyway, it starts with us. Do our own homework. Thank you for your help.
Yeah, I would say Representative Wiener and I are enjoying having a very broad discussion this morning, and to the point was made earlier, we don't always get such robust attendance at these events, and we do enjoy a lively debate.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Husby from Little Falls here, Morrison County. You mentioned all the overregulation that they have for the daycares. I just wanted to say there's also a lot of overregulation for nursing homes and for adult daycares. I was speaking with the CEO here of St. Otto's. My mom used to go to the adult daycare. She has passed since, but after COVID, they did not, their license lapsed. And now they can't have an adult daycare because they can't do it in the same building that they're doing it, that they have the nursing home. And so all of these regulations just kind of repress the possibilities that adults could have to stay at home. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
And I would like to address that. You're exactly right. There's more regulation means more cost. Every time we add another piece of legislation that, and there was some recently that I looked at and I thought on the surface, this is dealing with an issue, but there's always unintended consequences. Every time we put another piece of regulation on something, it has the potential to add cost to something as well. So we have to be very careful, and this is part of the process of being a legislator too. When you see these bills and you say, hey, you know, this is something I think I can get behind, but then you start doing this studying and research and reading bills, and this was something I was very proud of some of our new members this year. There was a piece of legislation that came across the desk that had to do with franchises, and one of the new reps said, Mike, what do you think about this bill? And I said, I think it's horrible. And he says, why would you say that? It actually serves this purpose. And I said, this is not a role of government. This is between a franchisee and a franchisor. And when we put our nose into it, it's going to have unintended consequences, which means it's going to add cost or regulation or push one person, entity, group out and help another potentially. So we have to be very careful about what we do. And I've used this story, I just used it in tax committee the other day. The mantra of tax the rich. This is not a new mantra. This is not a new thing at all. And back in the 1500s, the emphasis was to tax the rich. And if you had a big home, you know, mansion, whatever you wanted to call it, they said, we're going to tax by the number of windows that you have in your house. And I think this was in London, but I could be wrong. It was in Europe anyways. So what happened? The people that had the big homes said, we don't want to pay this tax. So they simply boarded up their windows. They bricked them up. And you can still go to parts of Europe now, and when you see those bricked over windows, that's from that tax almost 500 years ago. So there's always an intended consequence and an unintended consequence. And we have to be careful with these regulations. May serve one purpose. Sometimes they're based on emotion or reason or logic, but there is always something that comes with it. And as legislators, when we're studying those bills more, I think this year especially, that's a good thing. And those discussions are good. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Marilyn. And just I'll speak to the more global issue surrounding long-term care facilities. We already know that there's an incredible cost for any individual or for a family to receive care, whether that's here locally in Little Falls or there's 3 long-term care facilities in my district and incredible concern because what's coming from St. Paul has only added heavy weight and cost and new mandates. And my own experience, both from lived life experience outside the legislature, then the work that I've gotten to do and the visits I've gotten to take to long-term care facilities in this role, especially locally, like I think we have tremendous care that happens within our long-term care facilities, and these government regulations and additional burdens create tremendous inequities, and we should be fighting for equality, and it raises the cost and it makes it nearly impossible for these business models to exist in a place like Piers or a place like Foley or Little Falls. It's incredibly difficult for those operators to operate. And in the last 2 years, on a state level, Democrats have stacked the deck on what is called the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board. And that board has almost been given legislative authority to push down rules and regulations that exorbitantly increase the cost of care and could cause many long-term care facilities to entirely go out of business. And that's one of the key things that Republicans are not just fighting back against, but we're fighting to keep that care local, right? Upsala, where I'm from, is incredibly blessed because in the last decade, a lot of focus was paid to, hey, can we create an assisted living type facility in Upsala? And my goodness, I mean, it's actually helped Upsala grow. And like my own family members have had the chance to live out their final days there, which is what we want. Care as close to home as possible in the communities that people are from, cared for by their friends and neighbors in that area. And what we're seeing from St. Paul is exactly what Mike said, a bunch of unintended consequences that threaten our future livelihood on this topic.
My name is Doug Adams. I live here in Little Falls, but I also work for the Initiative Foundation. And I'm here just to ask that you would get on board with Representative Baker on the Small Business Assistance Partnership and saving the help that we provide to small businesses around our counties in rural Minnesota, giving them knowledge on how to run small businesses, partnering with lending to help finance those businesses. Every dollar that we put in usually gets another private $4 of private dollars. So, and you brought up Upsala, part of the assisted living there. We did help with that project also. So.
Well, I'll take that quickly. Thank you, Doug. We just had a bill hearing on that in the last week or 10 days. And you referenced Representative Dave Baker. He's from the Wilmer area. He serves currently as the chair of the Workforce Development, Labor and Industry, and essentially Economic Development Committee. And he does a great job. The fact that he's the chief author of your bill, I would say, speaks very well for the likelihood that it's going to be included. And I appreciate your comments in support of that, because now I can go back when we're either in those budget conversations, conference committee, and say, locally, this is the impact that this had. And in addition, my constituents have advocated for that as well. So, but to your point, these dollars that have been advocated for or worked through the deed agency have resulted, to your point, in additional spin-off dollars and investment, and that's the sort of public-private partnership in part, especially when we're talking about economic development, that pays off for rural communities.
I think Isaac covered that very well. And with Representative Baker, carrying that bill, the chances are good. So, and we need growth, we need economic development in our area, because once again, we want to make sure that our kids and grandkids have jobs here in the future and stay here.
Well, I did find the bill. It was co-authored by Nate Wiesenberg, and it's MNSF 956. Thank you.
Good morning, Bill Osberg. Thank you, Ms. Purva, through the Chamber of Commerce to establish this particular gathering, as you do 2 or 3 times a year. Thank you, Ms. Deb, for being on the Legislative Committee. I didn't know you were on that for the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for being there. Representative Isaac Shultz and Representative Matt Wiener. My history with Representative Shultz goes back to before he was even a thought. His grandfather and I painted together with my grandfather, who taught me the painting business. Painting's been good to me. You mentioned a couple things about bringing bills out onto a committee, which they have to start at, I assume, sometimes just for discussion. So I'm gonna, did I say my name? Yes. Did I? Oh, thank you. You know, it's called the first thing to go is a memory, but I can't remember what the second thing is. Bills that brought up for discussion. So I'm going to bring up something because you said you like some heated discussion or perhaps something to start a discussion. So I'm going to ask a question of both of you gentlemen. Who is going to be the candidate for the governorship of Minnesota in 2026? And if you're willing to offer that idea, I have ideas, but I won't bring those out. Then the other question would be, what's your idea of the possibility of the candidates on the DFL side in 2026? Because the election is 2026, correct? Thank you.
Thanks. You know, it's a good question, and it has come up many times. There's some candidates who have thrown their hat in the ring. And really, some of those things are going to kind of shake themselves out. We don't know until the last filing day is really the way it works out. Some folks who are in government right now, representatives, senators, and so forth, are focusing on their positions and their duties, and will probably not make any decisions or announcements until after session, because the responsibilities that we have, you know, in the House or Senate or so forth, we need to focus on that. There are some other people who are outside of that system right now. I think Dr. Jensen has shown some interest. I think Kendall Qualls has shown some interest as well for governor. Not sure what Governor Walz's position or what his desire is moving forward. That, you know, it's time. Time will tell. But to make speculation, I want to make sure that we have just qualified good candidates. And we've seen, I guess learning through the process, I've seen some candidates that get involved that you wouldn't think had a chance, but develop and grow as candidates and do really well. For myself, I never planned on getting into politics. I really didn't. When we were redistricted a few years ago, I looked at my wife and I said, I'm going to run for office. And I've shared this story before. I had never held an elected position before. And she said, are you serious? I said, as a heart attack. She goes, what do you think your chances are winning? I said, not a hope in heck. She said, then why do it? I said, I simply want to learn the process. I want to know how it works, and I just want to try it. Lo and behold, I got the endorsement, had to go to primary, won the primary, and then general election, and now this is my second term. Now, I'm not saying I'm a good candidate or representative, but I took a chance. And so we see some people that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be involved in politics who are simply driven. And then you see other people who want to get involved for whatever reason that kind of flare out. And it's always an interesting process to me, and I love studying just about anything. And the election cycles, how it affects people, how it affects our culture is really interesting to me. But this is also, it has turned into sort of a business. It takes a lot of money to win statewide races. And when we see, even like was mentioned before, in Wisconsin, was it 21 million, I think?
95 million between the two.
Okay, I thought it was 25 or something like that on the one side, 40 on the other, is some of the numbers I saw. Consider that. I mean, even if it was 95 million for a Supreme Court, that is an incredible amount of money that goes into politics. I don't know if that's the best thing. I would like to find ways that we could actually take some of the money out. And is that possible? I don't know. But it has become a huge business. And instead of sometimes the best candidates making it across the finish line, it's who can promise the most things to the biggest money. And that's not a good thing. You know, our system of government was supposed to be representative. It was supposed to start at the local level with endorsements at the people. But it is really tough nowadays for some good candidates to make it without the money. And is there a way we can change it? Could we cap the amount of money that goes into races? I would be really intrigued to see if that would work. But as far as what's going to happen in the next 2 years, running for the statewide races, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, auditor, attorney general, just start pulling names out of a hat, and you'll probably come up with as good a guess as I could give you right now.
Mike did a great job. I love it. Like the landscape and the 30,000 foot level, kind of the storytelling of it. So I'm going to quickly talk about the Democrat side of the ticket. You know, Governor Walz, if he were to run again, which he so far has indicated that he is going to, if he were to run and win, he would be the only governor to have served 3 consecutive terms. And Minnesota doesn't have term limits on governor, or actually I don't think on anything, but there's actually a bill moving to do that, to make it more in line with what the presidency is. And but frankly, one of the interesting things, and I'm going to celebrate this, there was something that came out in a newsletter about a week, well, it would almost be 2 weeks ago now, that said that Governor Walz's favorability ratings in Minnesota were beneath Donald Trump's. Just for frame of reference, like, he's incredibly unpopular, which is kind of why I'm enjoying him going across the country trying to convince people. I mean, let's talk about that for a moment. Governor Walz has never held an open public town hall during any one of the 7 years that he has been the governor of this state. Mike and I do this event multiple times a year, where we're readily accessible to you all. And in order, the only event that modeled a town hall for Governor Walz in Minnesota actually took place 2 weekends ago in Rochester, and it was a ticketed event by the DFL in order to participate in that. So, and frankly, I think that you miss the heartbeat of the people if you aren't doing these meetings. And I enjoy them. I love every opportunity, including to hear from people like Mary today. I enjoy hearing what people have to say, and it's why I seek to be accessible. So when we look at the race for governor, I think that Governor Walz is damaged goods. He has brought about the largest fraud era in the history, not just of the state of Minnesota, but quite likely the largest fraud in any state in the entire country at any point in time in history. Over $600 million of known fraud in Minnesota. There are other people who are talking about running on the DFL side. Angie Craig has indicated some interest in running. She would be very formidable as the congresswoman from the 2nd District. I think Keith Ellison probably has some interest. I think on the DFL side, the greatest wild card would be if former Congressman Dean Phillips were to jump into the race. One is someone who comes from great wealth, but as someone who stood up to Joe Biden and ran against him. I think that would be pretty interesting. Republican side, Mike mentioned a few names. A few others that just come to mind that have expressed some interest would be Mike Lindell, Kristen Robbins, Michelle Tafoya, Matt Burke, Jim Shultz, and this is my current personal favorite, though I don't think he's expressed any specific interest.
No, I'm not running.
Is actually Ryan Wilson. He was the Republican candidate for state auditor a couple years ago and was the closest Republican to victory. And for me, I want the most conservative candidate that can get elected in Minnesota to help restore freedom and prosperity in our state. Ryan happens to be a dad. He's an attorney. He helps today lead one of Minnesota's best conservative organizations. He's a tremendous communicator, but he's very best way to put it, normal. Like he's just your regular everyday dad, and Ryan Wilson. And as an example, one way that Mike and I interacted with him in the last couple months was he was helping lead, and he spoke on the steps of the Capitol on the day that we were fighting to protect girls and women in the battle to protect their ability to compete in sports and against biological men. And so Ryan he's a great communicator, very common sense, and extremely down to earth.
I'm so glad that Isaac didn't ask me to run for governor. We joke a little bit, but the political landscape, like I said, he threw out some good names. But when it comes right down to it, how is this going to pan out? It's anybody's game. Dean Phillips is an interesting name to throw out because he has picked more of a moderate lane. And in this state, that may bode well for him. But politics is interesting. And when it all comes down to the end, it's who can get the most money, who can activate their people the most, and who has a dynamic personality, so to speak. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be interested. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years.
Excuse me for interrupting. Why don't you ask the gentleman next to you, Mr. Weiner?
If he's running for governor?
Ask him.
I'm running for governor.
Well, I don't mean this year, but in the future.
I have an 8-month-old, and he's awesome.
Jim Storley, Little Falls again. I'm going to step out of the veterans advocate box because something that really has bothered me over the last 15, 18 years is what you were referring to, jumping into that political arena, and that's the cost, money. The biggest problem I see right now is the extreme that both our left and our right are going. It's getting so far apart, there is no middle ground anymore. There is no room for independence. And the problem is, the number one reason was a ruling by the Supreme Court about 15 years ago called Citizens United. That raised money up into the billions for people to get elected. Our elections are not run by the people anymore, it's run by money. Plain and simple. And it's easy to explain. I hear today about fraud. Fraud is not something that happens in a bubble. Fraud has to have a human element involved with it. So if there's all this fraud going on and all this different stuff, how come I'm not seeing any indictments, any arrests, anything like that? So until that Citizens United decision can be repealed and some type of public financing for our people that want to get into an elected position, until that's reformed, we're going to see this extremism going on and on and on. Thank you.
Well, on Citizens United in particular, that's best handled at that federal level, right? So, and to the extent at which you're able, and they certainly do come around our community on a regular basis, talk to our members of Congress and the U.S. Senate, and address it with them, because I believe that's the lens through which that should be dealt with.
On the state level, we have the PCR funds, which is political campaign pain reimbursement, if I remember correctly. And that allows people to donate to a candidate. And at first, when I thought about this, I thought, I don't know that I want government paying for candidates. But then, after further consideration, I thought, well, maybe that's the better way to do it. Is if you can, especially on these local races, you're going to be forced to go out for some people. I don't know if it's necessarily forced for me, but you're going to be asking for your constituents to support you, and then take the other funding out of it. The PACs, the lobbyists, and so forth. And I thought, is that a better route? I don't know. I'm always open for discussion, but when we see, and it's billions of dollars that we spend in elections, more than many countries' GDP. Like I said, this has come a huge business. And when we talk about extremists in politics, or the far right, far left, well, there again, we're pulling some things into government that shouldn't necessarily be there, I feel. And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to look at sometimes and say, is this a role of government? Our setup, our original founding fathers wanted government to be very limited. And a government closest to the people is the best. And yet, who knows who your township supervisor is? How many of us know who our township supervisors are? That's good. That's great. Most people have no clue. Our little red schoolhouses that used to dot the countryside, you knew who your principal was. You knew who your teachers were. And if there was an issue, you could go right to them. But every time we add another level of bureaucracy, another level of spending, you get further and further away from that closeness of government. Your sheriff is an elected position, wisely done. If you have a problem with your sheriff, you can vote them out. I mean, thank God we have some of the ones that we do around here. Thank you, Sean, for being here and what you do. But if there's a problem with Sean, you can go and talk to him. I've got his number on my phone. Can you do that at the state level? Can you do that at the federal level? Will you get contacted back from the Attorney General in the state of Minnesota? Probably not. I don't get any information back. My county attorney is elected. I can call him and ask him questions. He will respond to me. That's what we're supposed to have. It was never meant to be so far away from the people. It was meant to be close. It's the most efficient, most responsive government is the one closest to us. And we've got away from that. And we need to get back to it.
Bill Osberg, I said it this time. Ms. Perva, if I may, Representative Wiener, it's the PCR, right? And Representative Shultz. And I believe that's $75 now. You send in to a candidate, you get a $75 back from the state of Minnesota. But now, representatives, is it only for a one-time deal? You can send in like to 2 or 3 different candidates or to the state Republican Party or DFL Party, is that right?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain the political contribution refund program to you. So any individual in the room, any Minnesota, I believe it's set up to be like income tax, well, not income taxpayer, but you have to be a Minnesotan. So the way that it works is every year, so you can do it in both 2025 and 2026, can write a contribution up to $75 per person or $150 per couple to the candidate or the party unit of choice, either side of the aisle, any side of the aisle. Now, candidates actually have to choose whether they're going to participate in that. I believe all the party units do, as so far as I know. But the individual candidates have to choose whether they're going to do that. And then when you do that as a candidate, you also are agreeing to you're agreeing to limits on how much money you are raising and spending. And so that does create a cap on how much is usually spent in those races. Mike and I's races are far more affordable than if we were in a district that was 50-50 Republican-Democrat. And that's an honest question that, colleagues of ours have to ask themselves. For example, our friend Bernie Perryman in St. Cloud has had what has been seen as a very purple district, and so she raises a whole lot of money. So she actually doesn't agree to the PCR, or the limit that allows her to take the PCR, because she knows she needs more money in order to be successful in her race. She still takes the small dollar donors or donations from someone like you, Bill, but she realizes that she needs more in order to compete effectively in her race. But that's a choice that an individual candidate gets to make. So one candidate per year, right? So let's just use Mike and I, for example. If you chose to write a check to me this year, and for $75, that would be your amount. And then in the following year, you could write a check either again to me, or you could write a check to Mike as a candidate. And it is only once per year that you can get that $75. And my only other question would be if you're able to donate to multiple different people underneath the $75 limit, which I just got confirmation. You could give to Mike and I, you could split that. I'm just using he and I as the example here, right? You could give to both of us in a year under the $75 threshold and receive the full $75 back if you chose to split it that way.
So the other thing that I'd like to say is, every candidate gets to decide what they want to do. I'm not just saying about the PCR and not taking PACs and money for lobbyists. I don't do it. I do not take money from PACs, lobbyists. I only take donations from individuals in our area. I think there's a level of hypocrisy to count out or to call out those problems and not set an example. So I simply don't take money from PACs and lobbyists. I do see an issue with it. But every candidate is different, and I don't fault them, especially in other races. But I think, for me, I need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So I only take money from local people.
But you don't get to say what a PAC or a super PAC puts money into, though, right? They could do something that supports you, but you aren't actually taking that money from them. That's where the big problem is with PACs and super PACs.
There's independent expenditures that, yes, as a candidate, I wouldn't necessarily have control over. You're right.
We have time for one more question before we move on to closing statements.
Everyone knows that if given a chance to speak, I won't shy away. My name is Dave Stump. I live in the city of Little Falls. I am a youth services coordinator for rural Minnesota SEP. If you guys will allow me, I'm simply going to thank everybody for doing this today. Perva, Deb, the Little Falls Chamber of Commerce, thank you for sponsoring this. As you two have indicated, that closeness and that connection between our elected officials and the public is important, and you guys facilitated it, and you came. Thank you. I don't know Representative Shultz or Representative Wiener real well, but a couple weeks ago, a bill affecting our employment and what we do with our youth. I work with youth employment, called the Minnesota Youth Program that Carol talked about, came up. And I appreciate, as somebody who works with youth employment and as a taxpayer, I appreciate it when our representatives reach out to local individuals to get more information and support for bills and find out more about it and make sure that we're spending the government dollars efficiently. So on behalf of youth employment in our area and personally as a taxpayer, thank you, Representative Shultz. And I have the feeling that Representative Wiener does the same thing. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for what you're doing. I'm glad everybody came. This is great. Keep it up. Thank you.
First off, thank you for being here this morning. As much as it may feel that there's a lot of synergy in this room, and Representative Wiener and I are both grateful for that we have this level of community collaboration and opportunity to hear your voices. I'm going to caution that the weeks ahead are going to be bumpy. They're going to be very bumpy. I know that not just me, but I'll just speak for the voices of people who, from especially a conservative perspective, are going to be concerned with some of the dialogue that happens in St. Paul. And they're going to be concerned with the general budget trajectory of these things. And my way of wanting to encourage you is that you each have a voice. You have a voice by the fact that you showed up today. But I want to encourage you to continue to reach out, not just to Mike and I, but to each of the legislators, the legislative leaders, and ensure that your voice is heard. It's easier now than ever to make sure that your voice is heard. And this budget process, not just right now, but the next 2 years is 2 to 4 years, likely to be very tricky. And that means we're going to have to make some really hard decisions. I'm advocating for cutting a lot of spending, a lot. And yet I know that which I am seeking to achieve is not going to be achieved in this one budget cycle. And we have to be committed to the long-term solutions, which means that we need change in elections too. So know where our priorities are at, that is our goal, to get Minnesota back to a place, number one, where we have a balanced budget, number two, where the priority is with Minnesotans and their family budgets, and not about enriching government or protecting those institutions, but thinking first of Minnesota family budgets and what we see on main streets and with our small businesses and those employers. I say that because it's going to be so bumpy. So thank you for joining us on the ride to our long-term goal of making Minnesota a more prosperous, more faith-filled, and more freedom-focused place.
Well, thank you, Isaac. Long-term. And those bills that are conversation starters. I was proud to carry one this year, and that was cutting the lowest tax bracket. So if you make less than $38,000 a year, you don't pay income tax on it. Imagine what that would do for the typical Minnesotan. If you're making less than $40,000 a year, you wouldn't pay income. Anyway, that would equate, if you're working 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours a year, 2080, about $2,000 back into your pocket. And then every tax bracket on top of that wouldn't pay income tax on that first 40,000. We talk about making Minnesota affordable. I believe that you know better how to spend your money than the state does. I believe that when the citizens are empowered, they make good decisions. But now that tax bracket in the long term was a conversation starter. I knew in the current environment, I was lucky to get a hearing. But it's not a bill I'm going to drop. And every chance I get, I'm going to talk about this bill because I want Minnesotans to be able to afford those things in life. If you're a single mother, what would that do to have another $2,000 in your pocket at the end of the year. Does that help pay for fuel, your heating bill, daycare? Absolutely. But we have to start somewhere. We are going to end up with a bumpy ride on the end of this session. Next session, or next year, it's going to be tough again. But when we're working towards those longer goals, when we're having those conversations that says we can do better in the state of Minnesota, we need to promote our rural way of life. We need to promote how to make life better. We need to articulate our conservative principles in a way that people say this makes sense. And that's what some of these bills, that's what at least this bill was intended to do. Because I believe in Minnesota. I believe in Minnesotans. And we can do better than carrying this huge debt that we have. I've never wanted to carry a loan. A business loan, even a mortgage bothers me. Because true freedom is when I have the means to do what I want. And I am just happy to serve the people of Minnesota. I'm happy to share these ideas because we live in a truly blessed country. Most people do not even have the opportunities, the daily opportunities that we take for granted. Simply turning on a light switch in some countries isn't even an option. Hot water, when we turn it on, we take it for granted. A large portion of the world does not have this. But when we have a, $36 trillion debt nationally, and we're taxing our citizens in this state to the extent that we are, we're kicking the can down the road. And we're selling our kids' futures because they will not be able to own a home if we don't change the way we're doing things. They will not be able to afford their kids' college if we don't change things. Socialism has been tried in many parts of the globe, and it has not worked. Freedom, capitalism, has built the most successful country in the world. And we've veered off course a little bit. And it's time to right that ship. So I love having the conversations. I love talking to the people and a spirited debate that the Democrat tax committee and the Democrat chair on the tax committee and she just admitted the other day that she was reading Milton Friedman, one of my favorite economists. And I said, I'm so proud that you're finally reading some good economic advice. She scoffed a little bit, but this is how we start. Start with those conversations, we articulate our messages, and I believe that the people, like I said, I believe in Minnesota, I believe in Minnesotans, and we're gonna come to a better state once we look at some of these things and make some changes. So thank you, Perva. Thank you, Little Falls Chamber of Commerce, for having this. I always enjoy it. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here today, Mr. Shultz and Mr. Wiener. And thank you to River from Great River Television and Mr. Jeff Hagee from Morrison County Record for being here today. Thank you.
Was this straight?